You're watching TVC News now, and we are having seen live pictures from Akure, where any moment from now, YIAGA team, that's one of the election monitoring team, the independent election observers, are billed to address the press and give preliminary assessment of the conduct of the governorship election in Ondo State. We will connect with them. As we can see, they are getting set to address concerns and give general assessment of the election so far.
Right, we have Paul James, the program manager for elections, YIAGA Africa, and to address us this afternoon, we have Chief Ezenwawagu.
All right, those are live pictures from Akure in Ondo State. As part of all the activities, the crucial activities that make up the election cycle, YIAGA Africa is set to address the press, and any moment from now, we will connect with them to hear firsthand what their assessment is so far. Let's get back now, get some more reactions from our analysts at this time, Jude Ojo and Adewale Adeoye. Mr. Ojo, let's speak again about this concept of vote buying. I don't know if you followed the conversation between our reporter and one of the voters. Are we fighting a lost cause, basically? Yes. Okay, so you come to the point where I know who I want to vote for. But then, someone now comes and reaches out, gives something. Help us understand it really. Where is the inducement? I don't know if there was any inducement there, but what did you see?
Well, voter inducement has been explained earlier on, is a global phenomenon that is not peculiar to Nigeria. And in Nigeria, where the political elite or the political class have weaponized poverty, people are in such a helpless and hopeless situation that it's very difficult to convince them not to accept any form of inducement. As someone who has worked in this sector for over 25 years and who have engaged in voter education for that length of time, people always ask me after every workshop where you try to train them or sensitize them against vote buying. They will tell you, if I don't collect, do I have opportunity to see this person in another 4 years? Look at the road that leads to the front of my place. Look at the community school. Look at the infrastructure.
Okay,
what
Mr. Ojo,
have they done?
Let's put you on hold. We understand that the YIAGA press conference has kicked off. Hold that thought. We'll come back to it. But then let's hear what YIAGA is saying right now.
In the governorship elections, additionally, the Independent National Electoral Commission and the Transport Union Group successfully deployed election officials and materials across the state. By 7:30 a.m., election officials had arrived at 71% of the polling units. And by 9:30 a.m., accreditation and voting were underway in 91% of the observed polling units. YIAGA Africa observed widespread occurrence of vote buying across several polling units, which is becoming a permanent feature of our election. We strongly condemn this practice as it contributes to electoral corruption and political inequality. We commend the Department of State Security, DSS, for apprehending an individual allegedly involved in vote trading Ward 4 in Akure. Proposed party and candidates accountable for the negative trends observed in our elections. Political parties cannot distance themselves from the that continues to mar our electoral process. Our midday findings. YIAGA Africa initial findings are based on reports received from 278 of the 300 sampled polling units and processed at 2 p.m. on election day. Additional information and updates will be provided subsequently. First, the arrival of INEC officials and commencement of polls. YIAGA Africa observers noted the early arrival of INEC officials in the polling units observed. Our findings reveal that INEC officials arrived at 71%, as we earlier stated, of the polling units by 7:30 a.m. And by 9:30 a.m., accreditation and voting had commenced in 91% of the polling units. The geographical distribution indicates that 93% of polling units in Ondo Central Senatorial District, 95% of polling units in Ondo North, and 86% of polling units in Ondo South Senatorial Districts commenced accreditation and voting by 9:30 a.m. Deployment of materials. YIAGA Africa observed and noted adequate deployment of election materials like register of voters, voting cubicle, official stamp, ink pad, and indelible ink. In the open polling units observed, YIAGA Africa also noted the deployment of sensitive materials for persons living with disability, with magnifying glasses deployed in only 28% of the polling units, braille ballot guides in 55% of polling units, PWD posters in 90% of polling units, and PWD voter information and statistics from EC40H in 90% of polling units. Deployment of beavers. YIAGA Africa observed that every polling unit observed had a beavers deployed. Additionally, YIAGA Africa noted that 6% of the polling units had 2 or more beavers devices deployed. However, in 2% of polling units, the beavers accreditation count was not shown to voters to confirm that it was set to 0 before the start of accreditation process. Deployment of party agents. All Progressive Congress APC party agents were sited at all observed polling units. Labour Party in all polling units observed. Access to polling units for voters with disability. In 31% of polling units, individuals had to climb steps or cross over gutters to access the polling units, which made it difficult for persons with disability to vote with ease. Election infractions. As at 1:45 p.m., YIAGA Africa, watching the vote data center, had received the following critical incidences. Obstruction of election observation. The presiding officer and security personnel denied access to a YIAGA Africa observer deployed at Igbelowowa Methodist Primary School polling unit in Idonre LGA. They claimed they had not been informed that observers should be allowed to observe the process. Disruption of voting. Some frustrated voters disrupted voting at the Leo Hospital polling unit in Owode, Imuagun ward of Akure South local government area due to the malfunctioning of the beavers. Security operatives quickly arrived to calm the situation. Vote buying at polling units. The APC party agents stationed at
All right. Those are still live pictures that we've been seeing over the past couple of minutes from Akure, the Ondo State capital, where one of the election monitoring agencies, that's YIAGA Africa, is giving some form of preliminary updates about their assessment of the exercise so far. They've spoken to some incidents of voter disruptions, vote buy-in. They've also lauded actions of the Department of State Security in arresting someone, a man, in whose vehicle they discovered bags of cash. Not much information has been, given as updates to that story, but yes, that story also came in the earlier hours of the day during the conduct of the election so far. They've also spoken, that's YIAGA Africa. He's given us more sense of this vote buying concept. YIAGA Africa has also spoken to that. Kindly continue sharing your thoughts on this issue, especially now that we are getting some more evidence about this trend in Ondo State.
Let me also speak to, because I'm also monitoring development, and INEC itself on its X handle has claimed that of the 3,933 polling units across the 2,003 wards in the 18 local government areas of Ondo State, 3,823, that's 97%, opened by 8:30. The remaining 110 polling units opened between 8:31 and 10 a.m. So that's the update which is from the official handle of Independent National Electoral Commission. Suffice to say that this is a significant improvement on what was experienced in Ondo in terms of election logistics, that polls were able to start on time. Now, back to the issue of vote buying. I've said there is a notorious fact and an open secret that in Ondo State, there is a culture of diboko sebe. Diboko sebe meaning vote and cook soup. It is Ondo State that gave us that phraseology. And, while Ekiti gave us the stomach infrastructure as its own phraseology. So right, the point is... Let's try and follow, some more happenings from that YIAGA program there. Please bear with us. It's breaking news after all, but we will come back to getting more from you. Back now to the press conference. Let's try and reconnect again now. We've been able to reconnect over there at the press conference, the YIAGA press conference in Akure, and we can now follow what they're saying.
Of the polling units were observers, local observers, foreign observers. We understood that there were a couple of polling units that had attendance sheets for observers to sign. Some polling units said they didn't have. Some said they did. But my curiosity about that is, I know most CSO groups, they say, okay, they are employing a certain amount of number in each polling unit, basically. Some people said they're deploying almost 98%. And the idea of that is that as the results are being counted, you're taking the live pictures and comparing it to whatever the IREF platform gives to us later. But with at least, again, I can say 15 to 20 polling units within Ondo South, within Akure South, Akure North, and Idore, none of the observers cited. So how exactly is that meant to be achieved? Again, it's not a question to you guys, it's just a general concern that we've seen. In terms of vote buying, yes, I can say that was quite rampant also, but kudos to INEC in terms of getting their staff there in time. I think most of them were, unlike Edo, where we had issues with INEC staff not being able to use the beavers, most of them could use the beavers. And just another thing to flag was there were a couple of places where we went and the capturing machine for the beavers, the facial one and the thumbprint were not working. We went to one particular
as we can see, we're struggling to make sense of, the program, the press conference in Akure right now. Let's continue the conversation here, talking about speaking with Jide Ojo and Adewale Adeoye. Mr. Ojo, kindly, wrap up your thoughts in the question I asked earlier.
So the challenge about voter inducement and vote buying, which has been criminalized by our Electoral Act, is that it has become an established culture. And it didn't start in this Fourth Republic. I recall as a young lad in the Second Republic, I witnessed situations where money was being put inside bread and was doled out to voters in 1979. I was a teenager at that time. In 1979, people were being given bread. Inside the bread, you would think it's a sliced bread, and when you open it, you find money there. So it's a phenomenon that has been there with us. But rooting it out is going to be a huge challenge, given the sophistication with which it is now being done. While it may be very easy to confiscate people doling out cash for vote, those who decide to make transfer might be difficult to track, because what I have seen in my previous election observation is that in some places you just get registered. They will collect your name and your bank account, and the transfer will be made to you later in the day, where behind closed doors, in the inside closed set. So in that situation, you might not be able to catch whoever is doing the voter inducement. And as YIAGA had even said in his pre-election report, weeks back, one of the parties had been distributing fertilizers, grains, gari to different wards as a way of inducing them. But will people be able to resist this largesse? The answer is obvious, because when you have weaponized poverty, people are not paid salaries as are when due. I don't know how many states are paying the new minimum wage. Even when they pay this new minimum wage, how many people are working for government? And those who are living from house to mouth, eking a living, either as a subsistence farmer or as a trader or as an artisan, how much are they making per day? So the challenge is not so deaf as those who will not hear. It's not so much like civil society is not doing sufficient voter education. It's not as if our laws permit it. It's criminalized by our law. There are two sections of the Electoral Act that speaks eloquently to voter inducement and vote buying. But after the arrests are made, the point is, and I think I need to flag this, because this is one of the issues that we took up with INEC chairman in our October 31, 2024 meeting with him. The challenge he said the commission faces is that, one, INEC does not have power to make arrests. Arrest has to be made by law enforcement agents, or even where anybody makes arrest, you hand over to the security agents. Now, these security agents are the ones that will now do the investigation and subsequently pass the case file to INEC for prosecution. The challenge with the prosecution is that, unlike the Election Petition Tribunal that have a timeline within which it has to be concluded. For instance, with Election Petition Tribunal, the timeline is that at the first court of first instance, which is the tribunal, you have 180 days, which is approximately 6 months, to deal with that issue. Then on appeals, like a Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court for governorship election, you have 60 days apiece. But for vote buying and other electoral infractions or electoral offenses, there is no timeline specified. So it could take 3 years, it could take 4 years, it could take eternity for you to prosecute whoever is apprehended. That is one leg of the challenge. The other leg of the challenge in prosecuting electoral offenders and people who engage in vote buying is that you deploy 36,000 or 34,000 or 42,000 policemen. Many of these people are living and working outside of the states where they were deployed for election. So if a sergeant who was deployed from Kogi is the one that made the arrest, and he could not, he's not the IPO, he's not the investigating investigating police officer, he hands over the case. When you want to prosecute, you have to bring him back to come and give witnesses. The case of who saw the infraction being committed, are there witnesses? Who are the prosecutors? Are there logistic support for the prosecution? And situations where there is no timeline for the prosecution, how you can just imagine the frustration it will take for you to now sustain the prosecution when there is no timeline. So there are so many layers of so many orders to successful prosecution of electoral offenses, and more so someone engaging in vote buying. But by and large, it's not a lost cause. You asked that question whether it's a lost cause. It's not a lost cause. We just need to sustain our voter education that, look, when you sell your vote, you are also selling development. Because somebody who procured victory through vote buying will not be mindful of providing infrastructural development. It will tell you to your faces, I bought my seat, I bought my victory, so you have no right to come and challenge me if there are no developments.
All right, let's bring Mr. Adeoye into this conversation to get his take on combating vote buying. So election observers, you are one of them, have bemoaned the fact. We're seeing YIAGA also speaking to that issue. The DSS has also come out, with reports of an arrest of an individual found with big bags of cash on election day in Ondo State. What's your take?
Well, in the first place, I think, in my opinion, we need to clear this misty cloud that vote buying is not a universal phenomenon. Why there is no perfect system all over the world, no perfect electoral system all over the world, buying of votes is peculiar to certain countries, of which Nigeria is one. In the US that we are talking about, that Elon Musk was talking about giving 1 million naira, we need to understand the context. He was talking of giving 1 million naira to people in particular states, if they can sign a petition focusing on the amendment of, the First and Second Amendment. So it's different from the kind of corruption you have in Nigeria. The features of vote buying in Nigeria, they are unique, different from what you have in the US. In the first place, the perpetrators in Nigeria are state actors, state governors, political office holders, politically exposed persons. The funds they used are public funds, which are kept, over a period of 1 year, specifically to buy votes on the day of voting. In other countries, there is punishment. The laws are clear, and people are made to account for their actions. Like, even when Elon Musk raised that issue, there were experts already talking about the fact that it's an illegal thing that you could go to jail. And no matter who you are, there's rule of law in other countries. If you have found one thing, you will go to jail. Presidents in other countries have been tried, some of them jailed, which has not happened in Nigeria, may never happen. Then, in other countries, there is resistance by the communities, just we have had in Nigeria in the past. Here, it has become a way of life that when there is vote buying, people don't actually resist. They see it as normal. And we are talking about giving cash directly to people on the day of election, crediting their accounts by political actors. I think generally this reflects the character of the general ruling elite. You cannot have a corrupt political class and expect a transparent, decent electoral system. The government, people are blaming our people, but the reality of the fact is that The government is made up of the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative. They are the custodians of laws that guides order in any society. They are the ones that are supposed to set moral standard for the society. Why do we have laws? To punish wrongdoing. It is not the ordinary man that will punish those that have done.
Mr. Adeoye. All right, we seem to be having some challenge over there in our conversation with Wale Adeoye. I hope Mr. Ojo can hear me. All right, we'll take a break now and return. Mr. Adeoye, we understand you're back. We couldn't hear you at some point. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right, just backtrack. I think we lost your audio about a minute ago.
Okay, so I'm saying that corruption in the electoral system reflects the character of the ruling elite in any country. That the government is in a better strategic position to deal with vote buying and corruption in the electoral system. Because there are only three institutions that can deal with this problem: the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. Communities are not in charge of law enforcement. So if people have done things that are wrong, it still comes back to the table of the government, that they should take responsibility and ensure that the laws, the constitution, the dictates of the constitution are enforced, to ensure that there's law and order in the electoral process. But when you have a corrupt system that are the greater beneficiaries of that corruption in the electoral system, it will be very difficult to have a institution where we'll be able to deal with these problems. But I think that it's not a hopeless situation. I believe that the people need to be more active to struggle to be able to elect leaders that are conscious of the need to fight corruption in the electoral system. Or to be able to elect people that are ready to be decisive in fighting corruption in the electoral system, we will not be able to deal with this problem. Because the current political leaders are the first line of beneficiaries from the system. They don't have the political will. They are not interested in dealing with the problem, because that was actually the system that actually produced them in the first place.
All right. Well, that said, let's also look at another dimension of the security. Mr. Ojo, so of course, as we all know, election periods like this, movements are usually curtailed. At least by evening today, people will get to be moving around freely. But we still have that, concept in Nigeria where voting is largely curbed during election, as against you might, observe what obtains elsewhere. We're still doing a post-mortem of the American election, and one of the things that stared us in the face was how it was basically like any other day. Though we had a lot of social scenes, people meeting at the pubs, at social arenas. It was a jolly good affair. But in terms of comparison now, are we truly ready for that? Talking about where movement is free during election.
Thank you. It's a catch-22 situation we found ourselves. I have criticized and submitted that it's uncalled for to lock down the entire state or country, as it were, because of elections. I've been privileged to observe elections even in U.S., in Egypt, in Ghana, and also in Uganda. You will be surprised that this is peculiar to Nigeria, locking down the entire state or country because of elections. But you see, you need to understand the context that has warranted this kind of lockdown. Given the fact that we are in a very tense security situation where abduction takes place with rampant abandon, where people feel highly insecure, and if you leave the environment to the political class, there will be likelihood of shootout to engage to take advantage of the situation. So when you talk about large deployment of Nigerian police, military in the course of elections, you talk about locking down the state or the country, it is because of the peculiarity of our system. INEC is not duty bound. Neither is the police or security agents duty bound. There is nothing in our law that says you have to lock down. But it's just an administrative procedure that is meant to guarantee peaceful elections. Look at I read a report when we were on break where there were reported cases of shootout or in a border town between Ondo and Benin, or Ondo and Edo State, in Idore local government area of Ondo State, that in some communities there, in some villages there was a lot of shootouts meant to prevent voters from coming out. Just imagine if there are no policemen on hand to deal with that. It could be widespread. And because there is no lockdown, it might be easy for whoever are the perpetrators of violence to escape without being apprehended. So it's a catch-22 situation we have found ourselves. In other climes, it's not like that, as I've said. In fact, in Kenya, in 2022 August election that brought William Ruto to power, did you know that election in Kenya starts from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 12 hours? And people, just imagine, we, in our own case, we are even distributing materials around 6, 7 a.m. If election were to start by 6 a.m., do you know that the distribution to polling units will have had to take place the previous evening? But if you do that in Nigeria, you are caught in trouble, you are caught in anarchy. The same thing with why we could not have election for an extended period that will make election to happen under the cover of darkness. If you do that, the dominant parties will engage their political talks to undermine the process. I earlier read out my concern about the collation. And INEC, some of these concerns we have tabled before INEC. And the chairman, in the last quarterly meeting we had, the chairman said, Jide, you want us to have election for 7, 8 hours or 12 hours. If we do that, where would be the guarantee of safety and security of citizens who will come out under the cover of darkness? The INEC chairman made us to realize that election in every country leverages on the infrastructure of those countries. We do not have electricity in every community in this country. When I went to Egypt in 2014, did you know that election in Egypt takes place from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.? And 9 p.m. in Egypt is like broad daylight. Light is everywhere. So they can afford to do 12 hours of voting. In U.S., when I went there in 2010, election in many states in U.S. is from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And in fact, in some states, it's 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., which is 12, 13 hours of voting. And then the election is on Tuesday, so it's a work day. You have to go to work. Nobody will say, I can't come to work because election is taking place. Look at Ondo State. The governor had to declare yesterday as a public holiday. And today there is a lockdown. That means 2 days of economic losses. And that is part of the reason why there is also low voter turnout. Because when you lock down a state, when you lock down, there is the restriction of movement. People who register far from where they live will not be able to go and vote. So it's part of the reason why we have low voter turnout.
All right, Mr. Ojo, talking about, a general overview of the election so far, let's head back now to live commentaries from Ondo State. TVC senior political reporter Ayodele Ozogwako is standing by for us to bring us up to speed with YIAGA's preliminary assessment of the governorship election in Ondo. Hello, Ayodele. How are things looking from your end?
Yes, Kemi, it's done and dusted in most of the polling units. The time, anything after 2, except those people down the queue after 2 o'clock across the senatorial district to be allowed to actually exercise their franchise. But we started our assessment of the whole exercise, and it's like the mid-term assessment, a post-mortem or midday assessment, so to say, as done by YIAGA Africa. I have the executive director of YIAGA Africa with me in administration, Cynthia Mbamalu.
Yes, thank you.
From what you read out today, and let's start from the promptness of the ad hoc staff.
Well, I think first, we've seen like an improvement from what we had in Edo when it came to the deployment of officials, the early arrival at polling units, and our data did show that by 7:30 a.m., about 71% of polling units had officials.
71.
Yes, of polling units had officials present already, and that's how we begin to track if process will start early, if they arrive on time, because ordinarily voting ought to start at 8:30, so they should be there at least from 1 hour ahead to set up, settle down and get ready for 8:30. And by 9:30 a.m., about 91% of polling units had opened
That's
for
quite
the
impressive. 91.
Well, yes, that's quite impressive, because 91 is, almost an A if you're writing an exam. And if you think about that, it also shows that there's been some sort of improvement with the logistics planning for the state. I know that when it comes to the process itself, we may have issues much later to capture and report. But so far, what we've been able to track is that for the deployment itself, we've seen that even within the senatorial district, I think the only senatorial district that had 86% commencement was the Ondo South senatorial district, because you had Ondo North and Central had over 90%.
The riverine area.
The riverine area. We have, the Ilajes and the SLDs of the state. And for those places, we anticipated that we may have later commencement, because you need the boats and, to move to those locations, and they are hard to reach locations also.
Now, when you look at, in terms of security, your assessment?
Honestly, it's been relatively calm. At least TVC has been here on ground. That's also one of the things to celebrate media houses that have come on ground to cover the elections. It's been relatively calm and peaceful. We saw security deployed. In fact, our data show that in every polling unit where we had observers, security officers were present in all polling units that we observed, which for us is progress, because, we always say when you see numbers reeled out, we want to also see them when we go to the field. That's one. So far, they've been professional. Throughout my movements, I did not have any sort of harassment or unnecessary questions. I know in Edo, at some point, they asked us to come down when it was raining, asking us questions, even though we had our tags, overzealous, and non-professional officers that we met in some locations. But in Ondo, at least the locations I moved around, we did not have any of those kinds of experiences. And our observers so far have said, so far, the only major challenge we've gotten, reports on security, that is negative, is their lack of action when vote buying is happening. Because one thing we did observe is that in some locations, vote buying was going on from as high as 20,000 to 10,000 to 5,000. Oh, there are different locations. We had in Idore, in Ife-Dore. Ife-Dore. I'm trying to ensure that I'm pronouncing them. I know they've been laughing at me that my Igbo accent is taking over my pronunciation. We also had in Ileoluji. Yes, Ileoluji. We also had reports from Ileoluji, Ife-Dore, like I mentioned, where this was happening. And interestingly, it was not just one party, both the APC and PDP, where party agents were dispersing this cash. Some people were even complaining that they were promised a larger amount, some voters, and then they were paid a lesser amount. So you can imagine it's become quite embarrassing that even voters now feel the need to complain. They don't even think it's an electoral offense to come and complain to farmers, to come and say, oh, they promised us 10,000 and they're giving us 5,000. That is the cheating. But I think for me, it's a bigger question to our political class. And that is, what is the quality of our elections? Do they see their emergence in elections as a legitimate process, or do they see it as a process that has been bought or purchased? Because if you're winning elections, but you're winning because you bought votes, and it also borders on your legitimacy. And I think for the political class, honestly, we cannot make votes buying a permanent feature in our elections. We need to stop that attitude and provide quality governance, because when there's quality governance, where the economic process is better, we would not have voters looking for how to sell their vote. Because some voters will tell you they are hungry. This is where they will get their daily meal. And after elections, you don't see politicians. So for them, let me get what I can get now, because once election is over, you don't see them, which is wrong, because you need that representation in government. And I hope vote buying stops. But we hope that they start making arrests. We only got some reports. DSS made some arrests. But we want to see a lot more arrests. Once you arrest and prosecute, it will deter those kind of character.
I know it might be too early, but ultimately, from what you are seeing across the polling units you visited and your agents you've spoken to, 1.7 million registered people with their PVC and everything. Yes. What you've seen till now, how would you assess the turnout?
Honestly, it's quite worrying. So far, we're projecting we would observe or witness low turnouts because, there are some polling units, if we think about when we were here in 2016, and some polling units that that when you come, you see the numbers, you see numbers. And today you're going to those polling units, the numbers of voters did not reduce, but you're not seeing that kind of, crowding that you would see before. And I think we cannot call on the numbers now, but honestly, from what we've seen, we're expecting to experience low turnouts, which is not lower than, yes, because 4 years ago we had about 36%. Before we had 34%, so it's been increasing. 2016, decreasing, sorry, it's been decreasing. Yeah, because we had 38% in 2012, and then 35, and then 32 in the last 2020 elections. Now we're not sure what it would be, and I would be grateful if we have 30%. I would be happy if we do, but because
30% of 1.7 million people.
Yes, of 1.7 million, and in the pre-election space, we did engage voters at different levels, at different local government area. There was this lack of enthusiasm. So, and I think there are three factors here. First, you have people who have lost faith and trust in the electoral process as a legitimate process of delivering quality leadership. And so for them, why vote? My vote has not translated to anything positive. That's one angle of lack of trust in the electoral process. The other is a lack of trust in the process giving them what they want, in the sense that they do not believe that if their votes will truly count. And so there is also that worry that, yes, we vote, but does our votes really count? I think the third part is just a lot of citizens are disengaging from democracy, the whole idea of democracy, because a lot of times people were promised dividends of democracy. And what we're seeing is this high cost of living, insecurity is still a major challenge, even in Ondo State. In fact, we had more reports of cultist activity, kidnapping. And so the farm areas, you have in Ondo State, yes, a lot of the farm areas, the farmers don't go to the farm anymore because of kidnapping. Sometimes the kidnapping is done. These people have to raise monies to recover back their loved ones. And so if you think about it, economic hardship, the level of insecurity, and the failure in our systems to protect citizens and to give better standard or better quality of life, all of these things are interpreted by voters as the failure of democracy. And I think our government needs to understand that people lose faith in democracy when their lives do not get better. But when they see governance, delivering quality leadership and meeting their personal needs, then they will have trust in democracy. And so for Nigeria, for our political class, if we want democracy to be sustained in this country and to be supported, we need to have governments deliver on their promises, provide security, and meet the welfare of the people. Nigerians honestly are going through a lot, Ayo. And so sometimes you don't blame them for disengaging and questioning, why should I go under the sun or go in the sun to vote when this is not changing my life? And I think that is a bigger question that is affecting citizens' enthusiasm when it comes to engaging the electoral process.
Now, talking about the technology deployed, now we are going to be tracking what INEC will be doing. We are going to be looking at the improvements in the Beavers area. We are going to be looking at the improvements in, upload of the results on IREF. Yes. do you think INEC, they put enough things in place that by now, after the exercise, maybe by 4 p.m., we'll start visiting the websites?
Well, INEC had promised us from the mock accreditation, you know INEC had a mock accreditation last week, that one, the BVAS would be used and that the results portal would also be used. We did observe deployment of BVAS, at least for every polling unit we went to, the BVAS was deployed. Later would give...
Worked well.
Yes, it worked reasonably. And there were few locations where there were problems, and the RATEX, the tech support, also provided support to address that. And some locations had more than one BVAS as a substitute. Now, the other part is the upload. Now, so far, BVAS has reasonably functioned optimally in most elections. Where we've had more challenges, the result upload on the INEC result viewing portal. And we're hoping that, as you said, we ought to start seeing results. Or once voting ends by 2:30 and counting is done, the results sheets for each polling unit ought to be uploaded. And so we will be observing that. Would also be on the IREB to see the pace of upload and the quality of the results. Because you know,
we saw the discrepancies during election. After election, what was uploaded ultimately was different from what, you know, we saw 2 days after.
Yes.
They kept changing it.
You know, that's the challenge here, and it's about the oversight system built by Electoral Commission. One, INEC at the headquarters cannot sit at the headquarters and assume that everything will go on well. I think they need to strengthen that oversight system to ensure that the training, or what is in the manual and guideline, is part of what is used as training material for the officers deployed, and that each ad hoc official understands the process and the implication of their infraction or their decision not to follow the process. What we normally see, sometimes we have officials who either forget to upload the results or upload the wrong sheet. That's one. The second is when things are manipulated at the collation level. We saw that in Edo, we had more infractions at the results collation level. And so for this election, actually, we are also invoking the integrity test on the Electoral Commission. Why? First, when it comes to overvoting, we want to see that there is clear principle on application of the rule on cancellation of results as it relates to overvoting. This means that we don't want officials that act at their own discretion when it comes to overvoting at the collation, because that's where sometimes they start to change results. The second is in application of the rule on the computation of results, the collation process, that is professionalism on the part of INEC. The rule is votes are counted and the Form EC8A is completed at the polling unit. It moves to the ward level, and at the ward level they complete the Form EC8B, which is the result sheet for ward, and it's supposed to be a computation of results from the polling unit. Sometimes that computation is where there's a problem. So we need that level of professionalism at the collation level from the ward and then to the local government, from EC8C in local government, and then the state, EC8D. So a lot of times what we need to see is that professionalism and compliance to the rules from the ward to the LGA and to the state. And we're hoping that this time around we would not have interference by security, because our reports in Edo also indicated that the LGA coalition, we had times where security interfered with the process. And we need, that's why we said for these elections, they've been professional so far, that they will remain professional through the coalition process so that we will have something to celebrate.
Comprehensive.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. For a comprehensive report. Cynthia Mbamalu of YIAGA Africa. I want to tell you that after this, we'll be taking you to the process compilation. What they are doing now is the sorting of votes. After the sorting of votes at the polling stations, after the sorting, we go into the counting of votes at the polling station. And from that, at the polling station, it will go to the ward level. From the ward level, it will go to the local government level. And from the local government level, it will come to Akure here, where you are going to have the state's coalition center, and we are going to stay there all night. So immediately we leave this venue now, we are going to station our outside broadcast facility down at the Independent National Electoral Commission, where you are going to have the compilation of results starting any moment from now. So if by 2:30, if we're going to have the process concluded at the polling unit, so I guess by now, what they will be doing at the polling unit is sorting and counting most of the polling units, all things being equal. As we're told that the number of the time that they started, that 70% of those of the polling units started on time. So all things being equal, by now, right now, at about now, sorting and counting should have commenced in earnest in most of the polling units. Coming.
Place to rest our conversation. Thanks a lot for the updates. Of course, we know we can count on you and the rest of the crew for more updates, especially now that voting is has expectedly closed, and then other crucial parts of the process will follow. You're watching TVC News, our exclusive coverage.